Nobody in that hotel lobby moved. Not the concierge behind the marble desk. Not the bellhop frozen mid-step with someone else's luggage. Not the businessman pretending to read his phone near the elevator. They all saw it. They all stayed quiet. Elias Boateng set his carry-on down slowly, the way a man does when he's been through enough to know that sudden movements get misread. He was 43 years old. He was wearing a charcoal wool coat that cost more than most people's monthly car payments. His shoes were clean. His luggage was clean. He had a reservation, had held it for 6 weeks. In fact, because the Meridian Grand in downtown Calgary was exactly the kind of place where federal oversight teams stayed when they came to town, and Elias Boateng ran federal oversight teams. The man behind the security desk didn't know any of that. What he saw was a black man standing alone in the lobby at 7 in the evening, carry-on at his feet, looking around the way someone looks when they're figuring out where to go next. That was all Gareth Polson needed to see. Polson was 51, had worked hotel security for 9 years, and had a habit which his supervisor had noted twice in writing, but never formally addressed, of following certain guests through the lobby with his eyes a little longer than others. He pushed himself up from his stool and crossed the marble floor with the unhurried confidence of a man who had never once considered that he might be wrong. "Can I help you with something?" he said. Not in the way you ask someone if they need directions. In the way you ask someone what they're doing in a place that isn't theirs. Elias looked at him calmly. "I have a reservation." "Name?" "Boateng, Elias Boateng." Polson didn't move toward any terminal or radio. He just stood there, thumbs tucked into his belt, studying Elias the way a customs agent studies a passport that looks just slightly off. "You sure about that?" The lobby was quiet enough that the woman at the concierge desk could hear every word. She looked down at her keyboard and started typing something that didn't need typing. "I'm sure," Elias said, "because check-in closes at 7. It's 6:50. Polson looked at his watch with theatrical slowness. Then he looked back up. "You got ID?" Elias had been through variations of this his entire adult life, in airports, in conference rooms, in parking garages, in his own office building once, early on, before people learned his name. He knew the specific texture of this moment, the way it stretched, the way the air in the room changed. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and produced his government identification card, the kind with the federal crest printed clearly across the top, his photograph, his title, his division. Polson took it, held it at arm's length, tilted it slightly as if looking for a watermark. Then he handed it back without a word. "The thing is," he said, dropping his voice into that particular register that men like him used when they wanted to sound reasonable while doing something unreasonable. "We've had some issues with unauthorized individuals in the lobby recently. I'm going to need to ask you to wait outside while I verify your booking." Elias didn't raise his voice. He didn't move. "You want me to wait outside?" "Just until I can confirm." "In November." Polson shrugged with his eyebrows. The way men shrug when they want to seem like they're being perfectly accommodating. "Shouldn't take long." The bellhop, a kid who couldn't have been older than 20, had stopped pretending to sort luggage tags. He was watching now, openly, with the look of someone who knew he was witnessing something wrong and hadn't yet decided what that knowledge required of him. Elias Boateng looked at Gareth Polson for a long moment, not with anger, or not only with anger, with something quieter and harder to name. The look of a man doing arithmetic in his head, calculating what response was available to him in this particular room, in front of these particular people, under these particular circumstances. He thought about the 11 employees who were flying in tomorrow morning. He thought about the briefing at 9 a.m. He thought about the fact that he had been conducting federal oversight assessments for 17 years, and he had never, in 17 years, once been asked to wait outside. Then he reached into his coat pocket again, took out his phone, and sent a text message. It said, "I'm in the lobby. Come in." He put the phone back in his pocket. "I'll wait," he said, and he sat down in one of the lobby chairs without another word. Poulsen watched him sit, seemed briefly uncertain how to process the lack of argument, and then walked back toward his desk with the slow gait of a man who had won something, without being entirely sure what. 3 minutes passed. The woman at the concierge desk had started glancing toward the entrance every few seconds, though she couldn't have said why. The businessman near the elevator had given up on his phone. The bellhop hadn't moved at all. Then the front doors opened. They came in quietly. That was the thing people noticed later when they described it. No fanfare, no announcement. 8 people in dark coats, some with lanyards visible, some without, walking in twos through the revolving door and fanning out across the lobby with the calm, coordinated efficiency of people who had done this many times before. Behind them, through the glass, a row of black government SUVs sat along the drop-off lane, engines still running, hazard lights ticking. The lead figure, a woman named Constance Ray, deputy director of the Oversight Coordination Office, who had worked alongside Elias for 11 years and had exactly 0 patience for delays, walked directly across the marble floor to where Elias was sitting and said loudly enough for the room to hear, "Director Boateng, we've been looking for parking. Are we all set?" The title landed in the lobby like something dropped from a height. Director Gareth Poulsen had not moved from behind his desk. He was standing very still in the way that people stand when they are processing a large quantity of new information. And the processing is not going well. Elias stood up, buttoned one button on his coat, and picked up his carry-on. "Not quite," he said. He walked to the front desk, not Poulsen's security station, but the main check-in counter. And the woman there, whose name tag read Philippa, had already pulled up his reservation and was extending a room key before he finished saying his name. "Director Boateng," she said. "Suite 1402. We have the full 7th floor conference room reserved for your team starting at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Can I arrange anything else this evening?" "That's all, thank you," he said. He took the key. He turned around. Gareth Poulsen was still standing at his station. His face had gone through several colors and had settled on something between gray and red that wasn't quite either. Around him, the lobby had resumed the quiet motion of a hotel lobby in the early evening. But different now, charged, every person in it acutely aware of what they had just witnessed. Constance appeared at Elias's shoulder. "You want to make a formal report tonight or tomorrow?" "Tonight," he said. "Let's get it done." She nodded once and pulled out her tablet. What happened in the days that followed was not dramatic, at least not in the way that drama usually looks. There were no raised voices, no public confrontations, no scenes. There was a formal complaint filed that evening with the hotel's corporate parent company, which was itself under review by Elias's division for was an unrelated compliance matter. There was an internal investigation. There was a meeting between the hotel's regional director and 2 of Elias's legal colleagues that lasted 4 hours, and produced a document that no one would ever show Gareth Poulsen. Poulsen's employment was terminated 11 days later. The official reason given was a pattern of conduct violations. The supervisor's notes, it turned out, had accumulated over 9 years into something that looked very damning in a formal report. The hotel issued a statement expressing commitment to dignity and inclusion. 3 members of staff who had witnessed what happened in the lobby received quiet acknowledgments in their files. None of that undid the moment itself. The 6:50 p.m. moment when a man with a government ID and a clean coat and a paid reservation was asked to go wait outside in November, while someone decided whether he was real. That moment had happened. It was done. No termination letter reached back and unhappened it. Elias knew that. He had always known that about these moments, that the accounting came afterward, if it came at all, and that the original harm lived in its own permanent column regardless. He had watched men and women he knew go through versions of this, without any accounting ever arriving, without government credentials to wave, without a deputy director coming through the door, without 8 SUVs sitting outside with their hazard lights ticking. He thought about that on the morning of the briefing, sitting at the head of the conference room table on the 7th floor, while his team filed in with coffee cups and laptops. He thought about the kid with the luggage tags, about what that same lobby scene would have looked like without the lanyard, out without the title, without the text he was able to send and have answered in 3 minutes. He thought about every person who had stood in a lobby, or a diner, or a parking lot, or a job interview, or a hospital waiting room, and had nothing to send and no one to call. Constance set a coffee in front of him. "Ready?" "Yes," he said. He opened his folder. The work was the work, and there was always more of it. But in the margin of his notepad, before the meeting started, he wrote 3 words he hadn't planned to write. He didn't show them to anyone. He just looked at them for a moment, then closed the notepad. What about everyone else? The room filled. The briefing began. The SUVs outside had long since moved on. And Gareth Poulsen, who had spent 9 years deciding who belonged and who didn't, went home that evening to a silence he had not expected and would spend a long time learning how to sit with. Some people only understand what a uniform means when someone with a bigger one walks through the door. The question worth sitting with, the one that doesn't get resolved in any hotel lobby or board meeting or termination letter, is what we owe the people who walk through that same door without one. I keep thinking about the notepad, not the SUVs, not the termination letter, not even the look on Gareth Poulsen's face when Constance walked through that door and said Director Boateng loud enough for the whole lobby to hear. I keep thinking about Elias, sitting at the head of that conference table the next morning, opening his folder, and writing 3 words in the margin that nobody else was meant to see. What about everyone else? That's the part that stays with me. Because the story could have ended at the justice, the complaint filed, the investigation completed, the man behind the security desk cleaning out his locker 11 days later. That's a satisfying ending. Most of us would take that ending and feel like something got resolved. But Elias didn't stop there, and I think that's because he understood something that took me a long time to understand myself. That doing the right thing in a moment of pressure isn't the same as doing the easy thing. It's almost never the same thing. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't perform his credentials. He sat down in that lobby chair and he waited, and what looked like patience from the outside was actually something harder. It was a man choosing, deliberately, not to let someone else's smallness determine how he moved through the world. That's not a natural instinct. That's something you build in yourself. Over years. Through enough situations where you had to decide what kind of person you were going to be when nobody was making it convenient to be that person. I think about the character it takes to hold that kind of stillness when you're being humiliated. Not the absence of anger. I'm sure the anger was there. It would be there for anyone. But the decision not to let the anger drive. To stay clear-headed in a moment designed to make you reactive. That's the kind of inner strength that doesn't show up on any credential. It's not the lanyard around your neck. It's something quieter and harder earned. And then there's the intelligence of it. Not just book intelligence, not just the 17 years of professional experience, but the specific wisdom of knowing which fights to pick and how to pick them. Elias understood that walking out of that lobby in anger would have cost him far more than it cost Poulsen. He understood that the text message would accomplish more than any confrontation. He saw 3 moves ahead in a situation that was designed to make him see nothing past the immediate insult. That kind of thinking. Clear, strategic, unhurried. That's what actually protected him. And then deployed it in service of something larger than himself. Because he didn't file that complaint for himself. He'd already survived the lobby. He filed it for the next person, the one without the title, without the team outside, without the 8 SUVs. He carried the weight of that question. What about everyone else? Into a system that he had the access and the standing to push on. I don't know if I would have done the same. I'd like to think so. But I know that the moment I stop asking that question, the one Elias wrote in the margin, is the moment I've stopped paying attention to what actually matters. The SUVs drove away. The lobby went back to normal, but that question is still sitting in the margin, waiting for an answer.